Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Human Library. We would like to start this podcast by saying that I'm actually super thrilled to be back. It's been a couple of weeks which I had to be absent because I had some things here and there that I had to take care of. But I'm very excited doing this episode again with you guys.
Miss your ugly face.
You better do. I hope you'll enjoy the past episodes. Not that much though, because I was not there. But I really hope you enjoyed them. So I guess we're starting this bitch. Yes.
We're doing this. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna pass the mic over.
Aslan.
All right. So what are we talking about today? Well, I'll start with again. I always reference the past episode, but I'll reference the past one again. For those because I think they kind of tie in together a little bit, and we always like to, when we finish an episode, we always think like, how do we start? What do we talk about the next one, right? So, and it's always like there has to be some kind of connection. It makes it easier to build up, and it makes sense. So the last one we talked about the shadow, the dark aspects of our personality, things that we repress. And we touched a little bit upon the mass society, right? The individual in a society and how it affects us, how it affects our psychology, right? Because one of the ways the shadow can develop and become way worse is through our interaction with the mass society and the persona that we build up to fit in, right? And that's also something that is echoed in the American Psycho, where it's like this persona, and then underneath it's all this like repressed anger. And so talking about that, and then we thought, why not expand a little bit on it by talking about what Jung extensively studied as well, and the plight of the individual in a mass society, in a industrialized
I think by
society.
far Carl Jung is our favorite reference in the podcast.
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting because like with Jung, like I think like he was the main inspiration source, I would say, for this episode as well. Like in my case, I tried to, when I was doing research, I tried to like look into some other references as well, and we will hopefully bring them together, like Nietzsche, and try to like see how the ideas play around and see how we can combine them interestingly. But yeah, Jung's work, I think the main Jung's work that I will be referencing, well, two of them, but the one is like the spiritual problem of modern man that I read. And every time you read Jung, it's like crazy thing, because it's just like you read like one paragraph or something, and then he mentions something in a sentence, and there's so much information there that I think I need to dissect this. Like you can't just read and be like, okay, moving on to next sentence.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, I feel the same thing with Nietzsche, but Nietzsche would read the same chapter again and again, and hopefully you would get like 20% out of it.
Yeah,
because it's
yeah,
his writing is a bit like
to put some context for our listeners as well. I mean, I think we should begin from the birth of the modern man, let's say, because according to Jung, the problems that we're facing today are problems of the modern world and the modern man. And the modern man is a very different creature, let's say, from what was before the secularization and industrialization. And one parallels that Jung creates between the modern man and the ancient man, and I find that very interesting to me, because first of all, I'm like not a religious person myself, so to me it's always very interesting to be able to explore the mind, the psychology of a person who is religious, because a lot of times when Jung talks about the ancient man, right, it's always in a way where it's like, oh, this is what a really like a religious person, the way they think, and it's almost kind of incomprehensible to me a little bit, but it's very interesting at the same time, because according to Jung, the ancient man is first of all, well, I'll just use like an example from ancient Greece, because Jung used that a lot, but you can say like Egypt or Rome, but like Rome was already a bit less, I would say. But yeah, like Sumerians, the ancient cultures, which were more in tune with nature. And that's the main key differentiator, is that they were closer to nature. So they saw the natural cycles. They were much more in tune with nature, and therefore more in tune with themselves. And for example, like one of the things, I found a few interesting things that I'm going to share. One of them is the gods, the pantheon of gods, and how they had, and to people in the modern day, it's always a kind of a mystery. Like, it's like, what is that? Like it's like superheroes or something. You have like these, like this god does that. It has this power and that power. But yeah, according to Jung, they are. And if you have never heard of this concept, this will be quite interesting for you. It was for me when I first learned about it. It's that the like all the different gods are representations of our own internal motivations and drives, basically. So they come from within us, and they are externalized. And that's the main key differentiator as well between the ancient man and the modern man. The modern man is his inner world is internalized completely, but for the ancient man it was externalized. So they projected their internal world on one of the things is on stars in the sky. That's how we have the horoscopes. It was the internal drama of the human psyche that was projected into the sky, and in that way they actually understood themselves better, because imagine it's in front of you, right? You're like, for example, Apollo, the god of rationality and intelligence, and of your like higher self, right? And then Dionysus, the god of pleasure and irrationality, right? And they acknowledged these sides of themselves, right? And they were quite intimately connected with it. And when they were that balanced their psyche. Imagine if you're going through something, and we tend to be, swayed one way or the other in our everyday life. We encounter things that make us angry. They make us lustful. It's all the internal drives in ourselves that are imbalanced, right? And then when you have this integrated system, you could pray to Apollo, to give you guidance and offer you rationality. And that way, you're basically, in a way, if you think that it comes from within you, you're communicating with your own internal drives. So you are personifying your rational side, and you're communicating to your rational side. And that's kind of how prayer would work. Another interesting thing is that the dreams, in the modern day world, people don't really think of dreams as anything special. It's just like, it's like it's just random. My dreams are random or something. But in ancient Greece, and in a lot of cultures as well, in ancient cultures, dreams were a message from gods. And that's so interesting, because it's like, well, now you will take it seriously, right? I mean, if you believe that, right? But I mean, if you look at it, let's say rationally, right, psychologically, it's from Jungian perspective, it would be like things that come from within you. So it's not from gods, it's from your own psyche, right? And it wants to balance your waking life. Let's say, like, and Jung talks a lot about this as well, the compensatory function of your psyche. So when you're however you are in your conscious life, in the dream life, your dream will compensate for it with fantasies and your imagination, basically. So paying attention to that is a huge benefit that people in the ancient world had. But the modern man is someone who is completely cut off from that. He's moving forward into the future, and completely cut off from his culture, from his like this embedded dream of his ancestors. And now he has no context. And this is where you have the modern problems of like meaninglessness and anxiety, right? Because you're no longer like you don't know your place in the world, right? So and I would say that's the main thing that I found interesting, and kind of the place where we're finding ourselves, all of us in the world today. Other than, of course, I would say also in the West primarily, because a lot of the Eastern countries, and they're still quite embedded in this system, but the Western world is really trying hard to break them out of it with rationality and this questioning Western mind. I don't know if you guys want to jump in or give your thoughts or something, because I can ramble on.
Awesome. I just want to compliment in certain things that you just said, especially about like Greek mythology and stuff. Like to start with, you're absolutely right. It is quite impressive that the Greek gods, because now we say Greek mythology, but like back at the day, it wasn't mythology. It was like basically their way of living, a life, their religion. They used to like praise the gods and ask them for stuff because they saw the gods in nature. So whenever there was like a storm or whatever, the first thing they were saying is like, "Oh my God, the gods are angry. What do we have to do for this type of like thing that they cannot like internalize because they don't know what is going on?" And also like the Greek in the Greek gods, they represent the good and the bad on humanity per se. Mm-hmm. That's why like all gods in the mythology, they do good things as well as they do bad things, because humans are capable of both. Like humans are not like only good or only bad, this gray and this black and white thing is all BS. We live in different tonalities of gray. I'm pretty sure you have heard this before in certain ways, but the Greeks represent this in an amazing way when it comes to their mythology and like all these stories that they have to tell for people to be aware. It is like simply in like, how can I say this, incredible in those regards. When it comes to like the modern man now is like a little bit meaningless. I mean, like, I think what you like to like for our listeners, basically what it means is that we're trying to find a way to, how do you say this, to make our existence comprehensible. Back at the time, it was as simple as the gods want me to be here. There's a purpose for me to be here. I need to find it. Now, because we have literally murdered all of our gods, we're not like in a constant battle with nature, which is our Mother Earth in a certain regards, which is like our main goddess. Like there is nothing that we can see outside and be like, guide me, give me guidance, tell me what to do, let me like show me the way. And this is something about the dreams that you said that is very like incredible. Like for example, Sigmund Freud said that every like dream was like an inner like desire of yourself, and that you needed to be like pay attention, closer attention to it. But before that, like nobody in the modern human used to like pay representation. I don't think nowadays people do that. Like if you journal your dreams and stuff and you actually do like lucid dreaming and you're into this type of stuff, which is super like good for you because you like get a little bit more understanding of where you come from as a spiritual being. It is very like impressive, but this is not a common thing that people do. You don't hear this like very often in our society. Like this has been literally drowned. Back at the time, like as you said, it was like it's an omen from the gods. Mm-hmm. There is a message. If you have ever read like the Iliad or the Odyssey, like from ancient Greece, sorry, you understand how like all the gods play an important part in the story of the Trojan War, of the war against Troy, and the trip of Ulysses, the 20-year-old trip that it took him from the war to go back into his island, and all the things he experiences, like fighting the Cyclops and the son of Poseidon, like conflicting the mermaids with his sailors. Like everything is like an interpretation of the human life, like all the things that you have to go through to actually understand the reason that you are brought into this earth, the spiritual reason. Whatever you want to say it, whatever name you want to put it, it is kind of the same concept and grasps, like, that we as individuals, we as humans have to go through, like, but individually as same, but there's like a whole as a society that also kind of pushes us into this, I don't know, how can I say it, path, maybe, that could be the right word. But it is also interesting how in this Western world, literally we have like, I would say decapitated the head of Medusa when it comes to this type of like spirituality and grasping to earth, because we have just like torn it apart, and this has created this ambiguity of internal fight with us, which is pretty impressive. There's like an Indian saying from like North American Indians that says that within us there's two wolves that live. One is good, one is bad, and who wins depends who do you feed the most. You know, like I'm pretty sure like there's kind of the same thing in Chinese culture when it comes with dragons. I'm not quite sure about that. I do know about the wolves, but it's the same aspect of it. One is supposed to be ego, and one is supposed to be like your spiritual self, your higher self, the enlightenment position. But this has been totally like collapsed in Western society. There's no longer anywhere that you can see and be like, I'm doing the right thing, I'm following the path. It's like, no, it has already been stabilized what you have to do in your life. You know, the cyclical thing that has been like feeding on our soul, which is, I know it sounds very like, I don't know, maybe you're like this intrinsic topic that is constant, but it's a very important one that like you can see the roots of many issues between us and within us because of this, which is very like impressive. You know, like if you have never like read the 12 labors of Hercules, I would really recommend you to like read about them, because literally is the struggle of man, of woman, of human within itself, like according to this third dimensional reality that we live in, and everything that we have to go through, the way we have to interpret even our emotions. You know, like it is very like, it is a very like let's call it map, like ancient map of how to maybe figure out what the heck we're doing in this world. You know what I mean? Like, and at the end of the day, like even when we're social creatures, like we are also like, we're part of our past. So all of our past heritage comes within us. The people we hang on, the society we grow in, is influenced in our being, in our way of thinking, in our way of like actually walking, if you want to, like the pace we walk. You know, like I'm gonna refer it to the rat race, that nowadays we always focus on the rat race of trying to be like better and better and better. In the ancients, it wasn't this type of competitive nature, because of course they were competitive, they are actually like the strong will survive, but it was in a very more meaningful way, in a more like, I want to leave my footprint in this world, I want people to sing my stories, I want to make the gods proud. You know what I mean? Like it was very within the heart. I mean, it is like, basically this is kind of the grasp, like just scratching at the door of what the topic that we're talking about. And like we invite you to go deeper in this, because it's crazy. It is crazy. At the end of the day, we just help maybe to like knock on the door, and then you like for you to realize this immense topic that it is, right? But I don't know if you want to say something after my incredible blather, but
sorry guys, I'm sick today. I feel that it was a really good introduction to the topic, even though I think it's still not clear for the listeners what we want to talk about. Is it like beliefs? Is it the gods, or is it like individuals? But we
It's
want
a
to
hard
talk.
one, man.
Yeah,
It's a hard one.
Yeah, this one is a bit difficult, but I really like the introduction, and I just want to add something about the confusion that individuals have now in this modern world, especially when it comes to beliefs or when it comes to morality. I think the main challenge is that we have multiple options. You know, like let's just think about, something like really basic, like you want to start a business nowadays. And you hear like, okay, now everyone is making a lot of money. There's dropshipping, there is Amazon, there is like digital apps, there is design, there's whatever. And you start having this analysis paralysis of, okay, which way should I go? Like, okay, should I like touch on all of them? I think it's the same thing is quite happening for like beliefs, religion, or morality. Like, what is the right thing to do? And way before, like you were kind of exploring like ancient Greek or like ancient Egypt or like the old tribes, for example. they lived in a certain tribe and they just consumed whatever they had in terms of like beliefs or like morality. So they were not like challenging their ideas that much. And even if they do, they don't have multiple options. It's either like, okay, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense, but I'm just gonna like follow this to join the bandwagon because it's always the safer option, just like belonging to a society. Also, the cool thing about like having beliefs or like these people who believe that much in God, or they thought that God is within and they're divine, like Alexander the Great, or I can name many. It helped them perform and do like what they wanted to do back then in terms of like, let's say, wars or like whatever they're doing, because they believe that God is within. It's also like soothing. You have a mission in life, you're doing something on a like really big purpose. You're not just doing something that it's, you know, like could be questioned if it's the right thing or not. Like if you're serving God, that's the highest thing you can do back then. But this thing about multiple choices, I think it what leads to nihilism. Like you're not thinking about, okay, what's my purpose now? You're just overviewing like all the other cultures, all the options that are there, and you're questioning, okay, well, if there are many beliefs, what kind of belief would be the right one? And why are there like these many beliefs if there should be one? You know, like you just start questioning and thinking about these multiple options, and it leads to nihilism, which I think Nietzsche discussed really well in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. But again, I just think that it's still not clear what we want to talk about. We want to talk about the concept of individuation, based on Carl Jung's perspective initially. I know many people talked about it, but we're going to focus on Carl Jung, Nietzsche as well, because he talked about it from a philosophical perspective. And we want to talk about the idea of mass society, how it influences individuals, how it shapes our personalities, our beliefs, and how are we all a kind of victim of this influence, and how we can overcome or adopt some kind of critical thinking of just adopting our own values or our own beliefs. So that's the main topic. Do you want to add something?
I think that was really nice. The questions that you've asked at the end is really nice. It gives very good context and things to grab on. I think one interesting thing that I think we should start with is the mass society and the place of the individual in it as well, because I mean, I touched on the ancient man and the ancient world. We talked about that. But I'm sure people are thinking, you know, how did we come here? What happened? You know, what's how did we arrive here? Because I think like it's a very complex historical situation where it's like, you know, we can talk about solutions to it in a sense, like where you can think of individuation or becoming a whole person. Everyone's really familiar with this thing of like, yeah, like I will be a whole person, you know, I'm like work hard and, you know, be at peace with yourself. There are echoes of like, well, it's kind of new age as well a little bit, where the echoes of the spirituality, like the Western spirituality, which actually is like, yeah, well, all of it comes from the East. I mean, it's like the you know, the yoga and meditations, which is all really good that people are into that stuff, and it definitely puts you more in tune with yourself and with your inner world. But also a lot of people don't have the context because, well, also I'm just going to mention that I'm talking about the West, not, you know, because people in the East, to them this would be like, you know, my girlfriend is from South Korea, and she, when I was telling her yesterday about this, and she was like, you mean just the West, right? Like, no, you have like, yeah, just the West. Because to her it's like incomprehensible, the stuff I'm saying. It's like, really, that's what it's like? Yeah. Yeah, the I mean, it kind of started with the secularization and the Industrial Revolution. I mean, people pouring into these cities, like forming like a mass group of never before people have experienced such a thing, and it was kind of driven by technological advancement and obviously the Enlightenment and the Renaissance and all these movements. They slowly started like tearing apart the collective dream that everyone was embedded in. And I'm just gonna quote Carl Jung here because I love this quote.
Let's go.
He said, I think this was in The Spiritual Problem of Modern Man. He said, "How totally different did the world appear to medieval man. For him, the earth was eternally fixed and at rest in the center of the universe. Men were all children of God under the loving care of the Most High, who prepared them for eternal blessedness, and all knew exactly what they should do and how they should conduct themselves in order to rise from the corruptible world to an incorruptible and joyous existence. Such a life no longer seems real to us, even in our dreams." And obviously, the secularization of the West and the mass society kind of has completely torn us from this reality, and people today they completely lost the connection with this, and they don't even know of where all of this comes from or where they are in the world. And maybe Adriano, you can also mention something about
yeah, of course. It is impressive how like a species though, from hunters and gatherers, we are like literally now sitting here like experiencing this type of reality, right? Like, let's start with that, guys. Like, this is whoa. But like, yeah, what Aslan was saying in that regards, we're gonna be talking about like the Industrial Revolution that happened in Britannia in the late 1700s, early 1800s. Because if you think about it, there were already coal miners in the late 1600s, which is something to give you an idea. They conquered the Americas in the 1500s, in the 1600s, late 1600s. There was already coal mining, which like brings you into perspective the war on humanity for resources, which is the reason why the Industrial Revolution happened. I want to read something very impressive that says like, train connected cities together and became the symbol of progress, but they also brought destruction of rural lands and division between classes and rapid urbanization. This is like impressive in a way that before, literally, people used to live like in this type of feudalism, in this feudal type of system, which it wasn't amazing either at all, but like there were like small regions, small pockets of humans across the land. There was not this humongous thing in the middle or over there and over here, like nowadays civilization basically. And this happened because of the second agricultural revolution as well, where like farms started to be bigger, but less people needed to be working there. So farmers and other type of people that used to work in these places, they no longer had a place to be there. So like a massive migration of population started going into the cities for a look of a better future, for a look of a job, right? So factories like appeared, creating new goods, creating new classes of owner and laborers, which is like very impressive. Like clocks became technologies of standardization, literally time. They created a universal time, because before it was day. There was like not like I have a watch and I'm looking at 2 p.m. It's like it's still afternoon. I still have time to like grow my crops, be outside, play whatever I have to, like gauge war, whatever you think about it. Literally, like they standardized, they made this like human behavior a little bit more automated, more like I wake up at 5:30, I have to do this, and before 6:30 I have to be in the office. This type of things that nowadays is very common, and like I'm pretty sure you're like, oh yeah, we actually do that kind of shit. But like before it wasn't like that. Like timing has already existed, it has always been a human concept, but it has never been so much like in a ticking clock, tick 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 tick, you know what I mean? And it also became like a technology of control, because like between like workers and owners, the govern and the governors, like it's like you go and stamp your ticket when you go to the factory, and you stamp it when you're out, and they count every single second, a minute that you were there. This like destruction of the inner soul of being like, you know what, like, you know what I mean? Like it is quite impressive, and it's something that never before it happened. And we're still talking about the first industrial revolution in the late 1700s, because there was another second revolution a century later in the USA, but like the main one we're talking right now was with the world power back at the day, which was Britain, which is like where basically like where the creep of this nowadays society and civilization that we live in actually like started. And I have to say that it also, like, these mass societies started because they wanted like these goods and to process this technology. For example, one of the main symbols of the Industrial Revolution is the steam engine. Before, there was already a type of steam engine that existed like many centuries before. Like even Leonardo da Vinci had like a prototype like designed for like a type of engine. It wasn't steam, but it was like a motorized location. There was like a, if I'm not mistaken, French engineering, which I don't remember the name. You might actually do the research, but they were trying to do an engine with gunpowder, which of course never went ahead, because then would you just hear a boom and everything collapsed. So literally when they started to like automated the extraction of coal and created this type of steam engine that is the, as I said before, the symbol of the Industrial Revolution, started like connecting cities together. They made this type of, you know, like the individual started to be less important because they just needed workers. They didn't need you, Joan, or you, Jaime, to be someone in particular. They wanted you to be in plantation A and you in plantation B. And that's it. They didn't care about where you came from, which side of the country you were, what was your age, because we keep forgetting that back at the time, kids used to go to the mines. Like, you know what I mean? So it was like the beginning of this like rupture of the soul, which is, it is impressive. Like, also before like the Industrial Revolution, there was something called like the cottage industries, where like every, like if you wanted, I don't know, for example, a shoe, you have this cobbler at his house making shoes, and then you literally made a factory which like increased the amount of production, but then you left this poor guy without a work. So from a small rural town, as I said, like the mass, he had to go into the factory and do whatever he was specialized, but into this factory making 50 cents in its comparison to $1.50 back at the day, and like creating this type of system of which we live nowadays, you know, like as I was saying before. And this was like basically the beginning of the anima in mass societies, like in a historical way, you know, like, but it is what these philosophers later on started like criticizing and looking up forward, and it is quite impressive as we've been saying in this podcast.
I don't know if I should follow up or just count our blessings now, because dude, like, life was super challenging back then. And sorry, these are people like who didn't care about your age or like your, I don't know, like nowadays people just struggle with their like, okay, what is my passion, you know, like I can make money, but I need something that I can, you know, like transmit to the world or like convey a message, you know, like we're super sophisticated now as individuals and as humans that we're trying to deliver like more, but also I think we're getting a bit like softer because life was super challenging back then. And now if you can just like, dude, you don't have to go look for food, like you can just order everything would come to you, like you don't need to move. You just stay home basically, you know. But back then life was super challenging, and it makes sense that, you know, like the system used to create these copies because they needed the same kind of people. They didn't need like people who would be like, I don't know, think to rebel or to have like other
The
I don't know,
automation of the human.
Dude,
Literally.
that's a perfect term.
The automation of the human
Yeah,
being.
I mean, it's still happening now in different ways, but back then it was a bit extreme because it was only serves like the benefit of these people, and these people didn't have the tools or the ways to challenge this system, or to challenge at least the thought that maybe like I'm being controlled, or like I'm just being a slave of this system.
Yeah, it's like in the word, if you say the word massification of society, you think of the collective, right? And I mean, it's also an interesting thing where, let's say like people in the past, they were more collective and they were more, but like we're also kind of criticizing that at the same time now. You want to say something?
Yeah, it's because there's a difference between the collective and mass society,
Yeah.
which is very different, because the collective is a collective of individuals working for a common good. The mass society, it is not that. And we know that. That's why the world is in crisis. We live this like literally right now, like it has always been like this. It has just been like increasing potentially more and more and more, but like we live in constant conflict. We live in like where half of the world is on a diet, the other half is starving to death. This type of things, this is not a collective behavior. This is literally a mass society just looking for the common good of certain individuals.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that one of the main key differentiators for me also is the how the individual has become so insignificant, and you can feel that, as a person, I mean, also, it really depends on your level of awareness and self-awareness, of course. But like generally speaking, the modern individual feels a lot more insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And this is also related to the rising state power and like centralization of power, and the in a way, like, well, the religion of the state in a way. You are all, when you like, when we talk about countries and states, right, we think of them as like this superhuman entity, right?
Yeah, like institutions.
Yeah, but it's such a counterintuitive thing that like it's so bad for our psyche, our psychologically, because, well, it's made up of individuals, and that's the main thing that people have a lot of challenge and trouble kind of comprehending, is that, well, the government is made up of individuals. So if the government is fucked up, the individuals are fucked up. So how do you go about solving it? You go to the individual.
But there are many types of individuals. Like there is also status, there is people with power, there are many attributes to these individuals. So that's why, I mean, even if you have power, you know that someone has more power than you, and like the same thing, you're always challenging this idea of like, well, a country is bigger than us, and it's like an institution, and there's like, like a big team behind it. Like, again, like challenging authority, what we discussed in the last podcast. This insignificance, and that's, I'm just gonna throw some Nietzsche shit on you guys. Because he warned about this in the Spoke Zarathustra, but I need to give a context before explaining what he warned about. So, very briefly, the Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche talks about this sage guy at the age of 30 who went to the mountains to get enlightened. He spent 10 years there, and then he got the full enlightenment. And then he wanted to go and meet humans to share his enlightenment and, tell them about what he learned. So on his way, he meets this old guy. And this old guy, like he's really old. He's wise, but not the same level of Zarathustra. So this guy's approach was isolating himself from people and get closer only to God. So Zarathustra would have this conversation with him before moving to the town, and this old guy would warn him, like, they're not gonna understand what you're gonna say. Like, you don't have to just waste your efforts. But Zarathustra wanted to go and teach people what he learned, right? But on his way to the nearest town he found there, he was like questioning, this guy is super old, but he still didn't know that God is dead, because he wanted to get closer to God. But from Nietzsche's perspective, God is dead because we killed these values and we need to create our own values. So Zarathustra would go to this town, and then he would meet like a lot of people, like a group of people waiting a certain like performance. So he would try to explain in the beginning, everyone would laugh, and then he would try to explain again, and then people would laugh, and no one would take him seriously. And then the performance starts of this guy walking on a rope, and then he would start using this performance as a metaphor. People didn't give a fuck, so he changed his approach, and he started like looking for individuals that can have a decent conversation and see if he can like explain his teachings to them. But basically that's just the context. I would like to remind me, guys, I want to tell you something about like what's the aftermath of this like teaching to his disciples, because there is a really nice chapter in this book Zarathustra that is just like not mind-blowing, but you know, some deep shit. But basically what he taught them is obviously God is dead and we need to create our own values. And he explains this idea of the overman, which is the superman or the overman. Back to this significant or like this insignificant individual, the counter ideal of the overman or the superman is the last man. And he kept talking about the last man era, and he explained this last man era of people who are just, they're not copies, because he considers them all at one, like one people, or like one person, because they're copies. They're doing the same thing together. They're doing exactly the same thing, and they're just consuming. They're not creating anything. So like a mass society who is just consuming, getting fed from people, from themselves, but they're not creating, they're not inventing anything, and they're copying their same shared values and their same belief, and they don't have any purpose or any meaning in life. So that's the counter ideal of the Superman. The Superman is a person who reached a kind of enlightenment and went through many stages. Normally there's 6, but there's also the 3 metamorphoses, which is a bit like different than the normal stages. But one of the first stages to become an overman is basically to question, to have some critical thinking. That's how we call it nowadays, like critical thinking. Like you would sit and question your beliefs, and it's a bit similar to René Descartes' idea of like skepticism. Like it's like how's it called? Like you would just free this bag of whatever, and you would like start collecting everything and questioning. Like it's a skeptical idea, you know, like just question every tiny belief that you have and see if it makes sense. And it doesn't have to make sense to someone else. It doesn't have to make sense to the society, but if it makes sense to you, then you will start like creating your own personality. That's one of the first stages. One of the other stages is solitude. So you need to have some time with yourself. Just get away from the collective, get away from the collective shadow, get away from the mass society. You need to have some time by yourself. And that actually, like, my best period of like my best periods that I spent with myself, I think they were like the beginning of my self-improvement. Like when you just sit by yourself and you start questioning what's going wrong, what's going well, and you start thinking about your own ideas, your own beliefs, and everything that comes with it, without being involved with you know, like people or with society. It actually helps, because then you're critical and there is no one to influence you directly, but you're still getting influence, because nowadays it's super difficult, especially that everything is exposed and everything is shared on social media. There is mass media as well that is controlling your own values, your own beliefs, controlling the news. So you're consuming a lot of information from your phone, from your laptop, from the TV, from the radio, from school, from people. And even if you try hard to filter, it's super difficult to just come up with your own independent opinions, because you're just consuming everything. And I don't know if we're in the last man era. I would ask you guys if you think we're in that era.
Actually, like I want to complement something with everything you just said about José Ortega y Gasset. For example, he talks about the mass man in his philosophy. He talks about like the difference between the majority and the minority. The mass man is Mr. Satisfaction. It's literally everything that you said right now with consuming all of this social media is Mr. Satisfaction. I'll do whatever the other guy is doing. I'll just follow like this herd behavior, you know? This like, oh, they're dressing like this way, then I will dress the same, you know, because that's fashion. It's not if I like it or not, or like even if I cannot afford it, is I will do it because they're doing it. This type of mentality of just like, you know, being like point to this like square, this mind square, wherever you look around is the same wall. And
they basically create the norms and the standards
Exactly.
for everything. Like if you're just, and that's something really interesting, and you see it like in people's faces when I'm just having some previous experiences just being in the metro here in Barcelona. Like sometimes I would see someone who's a bit, you know, like looks a bit different with some different tattoos, different hairstyle, and you see all the, let's say, like all generation people just looking at him in a different way, because like this is not the norm, this is not the standard. And if you don't look like us,
then you're not part of us.
You're not part of us, and we should get you back
into us.
Exactly.
It's...
Like you don't belong here, but you should belong here.
Yeah.
You know?
But I think it's also an interesting thing with the modern world where, you know, I mean, I don't think like in the ancient world or in the past, I mean, people were, you know, dressing in a really weird way too.
Yeah, a way of expressing themselves.
It became a thing now. Yeah.
Yeah.
It became a thing now, which I think is more of like a symptom of this emptiness, or like you feel the you as an individual are becoming insignificant. So people are finding ways to express their individuality, right? And so it's like a very external way to express it. And also, I mean, the way you dress and all these things, it's kind of like putting together your personality. So you're kind of, you know, they're kind of trying to, in a way, understand who they are through that process as well. So it's almost like trying on different identities in a way, where you're like trying to get to the individuation process, which is, right, like discovering who you are and being, I mean, from a Jungian perspective, it's more of like, Jung always said, and this is the key thing for me, is whatever it is, and this is the kind of the crux of Jungian psychology, it's whatever it is that you do not, wherever it is that you do not want to go into, like what scares you, what that's exactly what you should do. And that's kind of where individuation also begins from, you know. I mean, whatever you're running away from, it's kind of like the place to look into.
A stoic approach. The problem is the path. Becomes the way.
The obstacle is the way.
The obstacle is the way. I was just gonna like finalize with José Ortega y Gasset, that in the Mass Man that he talks about, like he separates it between the majority and the minority, with like a complement with everything you said, both of you guys right now, with the like the way you dress and this kind of stuff. Like this is your own type of expression against, like a type of rebellion against the system that we live in. Is literally the minority, on the other hand, separates himself from the common values of the masses by placing greater demands on himself and cultivating excellence. Which is important to understand the word excellence, because of course life, it's our own interpretation of what it is and what occurs in our life. You know, each person is their own universe. Yeah, I know this is like a cliche type of thing saying it, but it's true. It is true. There's some things you can control, there's some things you cannot control. What you can control is what you feed yourself with. When you were saying before, like we're all consuming this type of social media and news and TV, this is a way of just like feeding something that you're not supposed to be feeding with that content. You know what I mean? Like you have to cultivate the best version that you can. The same thing as Nietzsche said about the overman.
Nietzsche.
Sorry, that was my Mexican
Sorry, Nietzsche.
side.
We apologize for this mistake.
But I mean, like, it's the same thing to be the best version of yourself. Yeah, sorry, Nietzsche, sorry. But like also complementing something that you said, I would like to read like a kind of definition of what the Übermensch is a being who is able to completely affirm life. Someone who says yes to everything that comes their way. A being who is able to be their own determined value, sculpt their characteristics and circumstances into a beautiful, empowered, ecstatic whole, fulfill their ultimate potential to become who they truly are. Which is beautiful, man. Become who you truly are. Dude, I also want to say, like, hey guys, for everyone who's out there and be like, hey, but I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to do in this world.
I was about to ask you this question.
Dude, that is what you're supposed to be, like, that's the fuck you're supposed to be doing in this world. Trying to figure out what the fuck you're supposed to be in this world. That's a beautiful thing, man.
But how's that? Put it into like
Dude,
like actions.
Okay, you don't know what you're doing. Of course you need to have a job to like feed yourself and your family and stuff, but every second that you have with your life, try to see a different perspective of life. Try to find and figure out the clicks and clacks over here and there. I mean, you have 2 hours free. Read something you don't like to read. Fuck it. Why
Explore,
not?
yeah.
Explore. You don't know if you're gonna like it or not. You're just like, I tried this food like 7 years ago. I didn't like it. Try it again. You know, why not? Like, I know it sounds dumb, but these simple little actions that you do recurring in your life, it will help you change your perspective of how you see life. And dude, there's not a single way to see life, even in ourselves.
Yeah.
As simple as that. Don't waste your time watching TV, the news, man. I know there's some time for everything. If you want to watch a movie, watch it.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, not like, put a purpose in your life. Even if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing in this fucking life, your purpose should be trying to find what your purpose is supposed to be doing in this fucking life, guys. Like,
yeah, like avoiding this automated life of just doing the same thing again and again and just following whatever people are doing, basically.
Dude, it's like
find your own quest, find your own purpose.
I see these sneakers everybody's having. Okay, I'm gonna work 5 days so I can buy them, and then what? I see this sweater that everybody's having. Okay, I'm gonna work 5 days now so I can actually have this sweater. I have it.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking at this TV series. Okay, I'm gonna waste all my time after work doing watching this series that everybody's watching.
And that's the last man era. Like, people are just consuming. They're not thinking about like any kind of invention.
They're so
or creating
comfortable.
new.
They're so numb.
Yeah.
People are just numbly walking.
By the way,
in
we're
the
not just
street.
talking about people. We are all victims of the same thing. Like, we're just explaining the concept. But I was thinking about something at the same time, which I kind of forgot now. But let me go back. Let me go back to Nietzsche. To Nietzsche. Oh, I wanted to suggest again Robert Greene book. It's called Mastery. Please go and read it.
I was thinking about it
because
as well.
With this process of exploring and finding your primal inclination, that's one of the best practices that you can do as someone who's trying to find what they want to do in life or your purpose. You just explore, like, play some music, try different instruments. Don't say I'm bad at playing piano because you never tried before and I've never tried before, and you cannot be bad at something that you've never tried.
But you have to start somewhere.
Exactly. Just start, explore, do different workshops, go to the gym if you don't like it, start running if you don't like it, play football, like, just explore different areas. Like, life is so rich when it comes to the activities you can do and the things that can bring you meaning in life or just a new perspective, like discovery. I know many people that changed their lives based on one book they read or one trip they did, or, you know, like, any kind of action you can take can change your whole life. Could be like a life-changing experience.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well. It's really interesting. The one of the ways you can do it, because I know when it comes to individuation, it's a lot of the times it's things that you like, the opposite of what you're doing now. Like, usually, like this something that's calling inside of you. It's usually things that are not, like, you need to cultivate the aspects of yourself that are it's like the things that you're not doing now. Okay, the opposite of it. And a lot of the times, I mean, people have these kind of, like, you know, inner callings, you know. I mean, it's like, I want to try design. I don't know. I want to try art. Like, but then they're afraid, or like they're kind of like, oh, I'm not going to be good at it, or it's like too daunting. But there's some, and if you listen to that voice inside of you to just give it a try, you start actually, like, in a way, like, balancing your personality as well, and now you're getting way closer to the individuated man, like the woman, the individuated state. And it's a lifelong journey, and for a lot of people also it starts from like accepting things about themselves that they don't know about. It could be positive or negative,
Dude, and also adding that there's like two things. Life is not supposed to do the things that are more comfortable for you. Life is supposed to be doing the things that you're willing to suffer for, even if that means...
Can we agree that life is suffering?
Dude,
like, do you both agree?
Well, if you want to do in a Buddhist concept that we live in a samsara, which is the desert of eternal suffering, then yes, it is like that. But like, to build your body, to build your mind, you have to go through hardship.
Yeah.
Because like...
Yeah, and I also just really quickly, I was thinking about, how like in the past, those kind of things were also more like understood.
Yeah.
Like it's a challenge from God.
Yes.
Challenge from God.
Yes.
You
it's
need
like,
to live up to your potential.
literally,
like, now
we're
it's
gonna
just-
march 50 clicks. Half of you will fucking die. Let's do this, guys. You know what I mean? Like it was like that, and that's the thing. That like life is not just to be like comfortably numb. You have to like go there and cry about it, because when you do it, and then the other thing I wanted to say will be like regarding this. One thing is trying things out for your own sake, and another thing is success. And I quote and unquote success because it's very fucking different. Because for example, in my case, in my life, I can only give you perspective of what I have gone through. I love like Muay Thai, for example. I suck at it, but I know I'm successful in my own eyes. I'm not gonna go and fight because I know I'm gonna get my ass kicked. But you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go and spar with the fighters, and I get my ass kicked. Yeah. But like, I like that. I know I'm gonna suffer. I know they're like 10 times better than me. Like in the gym that I go, I know they're gonna fucking hit me. I'm afraid of doing it every Friday. I'm actually afraid of doing it, but I do it anyways. Because I know that this is helping me build a character, and it's helping me build something that I'm looking forward to. So I'm not this successful Muay fighter that you see on YouTube, but I'm successful for myself.
I think the most important thing that you're doing now is that you're challenging your fear, which is many people are not doing.
Yeah.
I was just watching this podcast of the guy from Modern Wisdom, Chris something, with Lewis Howes. That's the guy from the School of Greatness. He also has a podcast. And what I like about this guy is that he has like different coaches for any life aspect. He has a business coach, he has like an emotional coach. Like he understood the importance of having mentors, and obviously he's successful enough to hire like mentors.
Yeah.
Obviously, like if you cannot have mentors, just like read books or like listen to podcasts. It's super useful most of the times. But what he did is he wrote down a list of his fears that he wanted to work on. And he started consistently like challenging himself, because that's when you have self-doubts, is when you fear something. Like getting in a fight, if it scares you that much, go learn how to fight. Yeah. And why would you deal with this fear your whole life when it can be cured by Muay Thai sessions, like 1 week or like 1 session a week or something like this?
No, it takes time though. Like
it takes
everything,
time.
Everything you do in
consistently.
Life, it takes time.
That's what I'm saying. Like one session every week, or like everything that you do consistently. He also brought this example of something like, well, it's not silly, but like he was afraid of just dancing salsa with another girl. Like he used to feel that's super intimidating. Yeah. I would say I have the same fear. Like I would not dance salsa with someone, because
sure.
You see, like when they get to dance, when they get to dance, like there is no structure of dancing. But they need to understand each other. They need to understand their movements. And, well, someone needs to lead the dance. And that's, for someone who's super structured and organized, like, this is just doesn't make sense for me, Like, I need a certain flow. I need a structure. I need to know what I'm doing next. But that's, like, basically just experiencing and practicing the same thing again and again. So he did, like, salsa for 10 years. And he was going to bars and just challenging like the most performing dancers just to kill this fear. And when he killed it, he was like, fine, I'm not doing this again. I would like dance from time to time just for pleasure, but I killed this fear. Let's move to the next one,
It's like you have to do everything once, And if you want to be good at it, you have to do it consecutively. You have to do it like repeatedly. Humans become good at repeating. It's like the difference between a master and someone who is good. Someone who is good practices until he gets it right. A master practices until he doesn't get it wrong, which is amazing, right?
And that's the path to mastery as well.
Yeah.
Like you need to reach at least the 10,000 hours of putting work into one thing, so you can at least say that I'm mastering this thing.
And hey guys, we're like, this part of like amazing discussion we're having right now is also part of the individuality, because it's something that you have to find for yourself. And it's easier for us to explain what we're talking about when we talk about like things that we like, hobbies that we do, like habits that we have, because a habit is what makes a person.
Yeah. The set of behaviors that you put for yourself is
Exactly.
what makes you.
And I do want to read a quote from Kierkegaard. I don't know if I pronounce it very well. Kierkegaard, thank you so much.
Thank God we have Aslan.
That is this, that I find it very like when I read it, like I had to read it like 50 times, I'm not lying, because it was very impressive. It was like, the biggest danger, that of losing oneself, can pass off in the world as quietly as if it were nothing. Every loss, an arm, a leg, $5, a wife, etc., is bound to be noticed. Like, that's deep. Like, you can lose yourself like this, and nobody gives a shit, because the only person that will give a shit is you. Everything else, like everyone else will see, but like the thing is that you have to feed your soul. It's already been attacked so much. It's time for you to feed it. Like as we said, like one thing is the collective. One thing is like the herd. You know, like this, the crowd, the mass. You know, like the idea of the faceless man in a mass. That when it comes to, like, as Plato used to say, the dumb crowds. They used to say, like, do horrible things because the responsibility gathers between the entirety of the mass and not the individual, so it becomes the faceless mass. That's why when you see these protests that are supposed to be peaceful, all of a sudden they become berserker.
I'm
because
glad you're bringing this up.
These people that they just decide to go crazy, and the movement actually totally dies when it has nothing to do with it. This is an example of what we mean with mass society, literally.
Yeah, it's the kind of the impotence of that people are feeling, you know, and I wanted to also talk about that, how like in the modern world, I mean, in our daily life, it's so easy to feel like oppressed, like to feel like crushed, you know, like
I had to take a side on this one, man. It was like, Jesus Christ.
Jung again had some quote about it when he was writing about the rise of Nazis in Germany, and it's kind of like probably the archetypal worst case scenario that could happen from imagine a society on a whole pushed to a brink in that sense, to hopelessness, weakness. And I think one of the main reasons why people should be cultivating these sides of themselves and the different aspects of themselves and exploring their inner world is and you can do it through what you guys were just talking about, you know, like do things that make you uncomfortable, like dancing or like fighting. It's very embodied thing, like movement, right? Like or going to the gym. I mean, it helps you in ways you don't even know. And one of the reasons why I think people should do it, and I could feel this in myself, is like, it's, as I said, it's so easy to feel insignificant. It's so easy to feel crushed. And what do you as an individual have to balance your own inner psyche, your personality, right? Yeah. Because if in your conscious existence, if you are like one way, which in this case is helpless, insignificant, unimportant, just a cog in a machine, right? And sometimes you feel that way, like even if you're working in a really good company and you have the great company culture, you feel like, oh, I'm just an employee here. I mean, I'm just serving the CEO or whoever it is and making that person rich, you know. And
changing your time, your life for money.
Yeah.
Literally.
And it's so, and people, and everyone goes through this unconsciously, you know. It's just like, and I've become kind of aware of this recently, but like honestly guys, like I've been, all this stuff that we've been talking about just brings these things in my head. And I think like, yeah, I mean, that's why like going to the gym is so good. Like, or, like,
Dude, yeah.
going to the gym, like, or doing this podcast, doing something, creating, like letting that built up energy balance, you know. Because if like, for example, fighting, right? Like, what are you doing? You're unconscious. It's almost like compensatory, as I said, compensatory thing, where it's like the balancing that has to happen. Because if it doesn't happen, you're gonna end up like, it's gonna be like a possession almost of your personality. I mean, it builds up, and I've noticed in myself where, you know, things that happen in my daily life, that, you know, the stress and things that you experience at work and things like that, if you don't balance out that energy with something, like remind yourself of who you are, where you are, it's just, you're gonna start lashing out on your loved ones. That's one of the things that's gonna happen. It's just like, because that energy has to go out, you know?
Somewhere.
It has to go out, and it's gonna go out in the remark that you're gonna make to your, like, your girlfriend or your boyfriend, like when they do something so simple and like a joke or something, and then you're just like,
it triggers you.
You don't even know that you're like, oh, I'm in such a good mood, but no, you're not in a good mood.
Yeah.
You're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
And that's like and that's something that I've kind of been thinking about as well. And I think like, yeah, the one of the biggest reasons why you should be able to channel this energies, right, in through your work, something creative. And I think like people should have something like that in their life, where they do something creative and embodied movement. That's why ancient Greeks, I mean, they were all athletes basically. I mean, like wrestling, like
healthy mind, healthy body.
Yeah,
healthy body, healthy mind.
Yeah. I don't know who it was. I think like someone said they spend like more time wrestling than like the philosophers, you know. It's like more time wrestling than actually philosophizing in a way. Like, it's yeah, and I know, and all this stuff, it's just lost. It's been lost, and we're kind of like caught up in this drama of like the modern life, the elections, and who's in charge now, and the stocks, and
money. The rat race, I said before. Oh my god.
Yeah.
And saying what you like, also what we were talking about, it is true. We are not like only body or only mind. We're like a soul in a body, having this human experience, like put together in this earth to go through whatever we need to go through, to like learn something, to like be better, to like get into this type of oh my god, how do you say it? Existentialism. Thank you. Bladder or plate, where you have to like try to understand what you're supposed to be doing here. You know what I mean? Like, this is very spiritual and deep, but like at the end of the day, it's our work as an individual to do this. Like, of course, like, I mean, you could be crazy enough and go and live in the wilderness. That will be up to you. But for the normal human, I don't think that's very factual, because you have other people that depend on you, and also you depend on other people. Of course, we're social beings. But at the end of the day, like when we said like before, is like try to understand and cultivate your own self of being, and don't let yourself be so manipulated by whatever is happening on your surroundings. This has always been like that, and it will always be like this, because it is like that. What you have to do is like try to separate yourself from it at the same time while leaving yourself in it. It sounds very weird, but it's the reality of the situation. Like, it's you and the world. It's you in the world. It's not the same shit.
Yeah. Again, I think that's related to like questioning, like try to understand the influences or whatever you're doing, because the thing that you just mentioned, I think that it's super interesting about like how competitive people were back then. But I think now like the competition just switched, like back then people would compete to who's gonna win this war, or like who's gonna be the best fighter, or like who's gonna
An
create
empire.
like even in the Renaissance, like who would create the most like interesting masterpiece or whatever. I think now the competition is only about like signaling, like who's gonna signal like most success, and success is weirdly defined by the assets you have, or like, okay, I got this nice car, I wear these cool brands, or like I have the latest phone, or I travel to these islands or like
Mm-hmm.
countries, and that's the definition of success is way different from their success back then. And this the definition switched from all the previous eras basically. And I think now also the perspective of failure is what's stopping many people from actually exploring these things, because we perceive failure as a bad thing, and we only have this survivorship bias, like, okay, we need to do this because that's more comfortable. And we have like some examples of people who reached that kind of thing and they succeeded. But again, if you're not questioning these influences, because I think it's ingrained in us since we were child. Like as a kid, you would go to school, there is one teacher, and I would just name like my background. Like in Morocco, in public schools, you would have between 30 and 40 people. And just imagine like one teacher teaching 30 or 40 people. There is no customized teaching, there are no workshops. You're just doing the things that you need to do in class, like you need to go and do homeworks. You're all studying the same way, you're all studying the same thing. And are we gonna be like the same product at the end?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's good for 10% or like 20%, or let's say 50% of the students, but what about the others? What they're gonna do? I think all my academic background, sorry Aslan,
No.
but it hits differently when I think about about especially like the orientation in schools, or like the guidance that you get from teachers, or like the guidance that you get from people. For example, I've done physics in my high school. I was so bad at anything related to science.
You're describing my experience.
Yeah, dude,
All of
definitely.
our experiences.
And I've done it because the most safe thing for me, like the safest option would be to just join the bandwagon. What's the bandwagon? Well, most people are doing sciences because it sounds cool, because it has more orientation path. And I asked the teacher, and now I'm questioning, like back then I just trusted the teacher's feedback. Like he said, yeah, do physics because you will have more options to explore after high school. But this guy didn't even ask me about my grades, how I'm doing back then in these subjects. Like he was just like, okay, do this because it's, like you have a higher chance of doing something afterwards. But I sucked. And then when I wanted to go to uni, I was thinking about, okay, what is the safest option for me? Like I don't have, that was my thinking back then. Like I don't have to do much work, but I need to get the diploma at least. So I was like, okay, English, like let me just do English. And I was not like reading books, I was not doing anything useful, but I managed to succeed just because I had like this basic knowledge of the language itself. But this is like not to blame teachers, but I think they have an important role in like the guidance they're given to students.
Of course.
And the whole system, like the system as a whole.
The education system, though, feels like a standardization of humans into creating them for labor.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
very...
It's making copies, basically. It's
a-
just producing the same mass
this
based
is
on
a
what they
topic
need.
Very
Yeah.
like crazy, because if you think about it, it's like you bring this natural, wonderful little kid who literally just came into this world full of like excitement, seeing everything for the first time.
Mm.
You know how you see a kid and they're like, "Wow!" This. Do you remember when you were a kid and you saw a tree that it was so big and you got so impressed? This wonder in their eyes.
Mm.
This is literally murdered in school.
Mm.
This idea and concept, at least back when I grew up, it was more. I think now it's a little bit less, but it's still kind of it. It's like killing the inner child.
Oh yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
It's killing the inner child of each person, each individuality of each person to create the common.
Yeah. Because if you feel that you're a bit
workers.
different, if you feel that you're a bit different, then you're gonna question yourself, like something is wrong with you. You're not gonna think about the 40 people, like the whole classroom is different. If you're just questioning, and that's what happens in also like when it comes to beliefs or like systems. If you're the only one, if you think that you're the only one, because normally a lot of things are taboos and you don't get to discuss them with other people like we're doing now. But if you're just having these thoughts by yourself and you think that no one is giving a fuck about what you're thinking about, you would just question yourself. Like, maybe I'm the weird guy in this society, you know, like I'm having these thoughts and probably I should just go back to join the bandwagon, because that's the safest option that you can do. And back to this effect of just joining the, sorry guys,
No problem.
fuck, okay, going back to this idea of joining the bandwagon, fuck,
The
okay,
bandwagon.
the bandwagon,
Bandwagon.
joining the bandwagon. Yeah, I'm not in my best state today, but it's not gonna be an excuse. We're still doing the podcast. So yeah, I just had like this thought of, you know, like how bad you would feel when you don't get like a good grade. But I remember now in high school, well, especially that, you know, like at the age of 15, 16, it's also like an age of you like growing up and you start like building your personality and stuff. And I remember this idea of, if it happens to all of us, then it's super fine. Like no one is gonna be that worried about it. And I remember in some certain like math exams when I was in a public school, like public high school, we all had bad grades and everyone was just making fun and everyone was super chill, super happy. Because if it affects all of us the same way, then we're super fine. Like no one is gonna judge individuals and no one is just gonna say like, you're all stupid, you know? Like the teacher might say it and we'll just like laugh, you know, because it's nonsense. But it's so comfortable when something, even a bad thing, happens to the mass society. But when it comes to individuals, like you're the only one who didn't get a good grade.
Dude, you always say like, and as an excuse, well, I was not the only one.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
it's like, oh man, I don't know, you broke a bicycle. Yeah, but I was not the only one. There were also.
And
two
that's
fuckers
how
who did
you
that.
would justify many things that you're doing in life.
Exactly.
Especially when it comes to like, I don't know, wearing certain brands. Like, why would you wear it? Well, you know, especially with again the mass
Yeah.
media.
Yeah.
Like if they want to control you to, I don't know. Now you have influencers, and the influencers have the niche that these people need. So, for example, a clothing line that is doing like, I don't know, like gym clothing, for example, they would go to the influencers who owns this kind of audiences, and they would just sell you what they want, because, well, there is a kind of trust, and these people, like the audience, look up to these influencers, so they would trust their choices. And that's a small scheme, right? But in the grand scheme, if you think about all these media outlets like TV and radio and the things that I just mentioned before, like if the system wants to put, now I'm talking about the system and the Matrix and
The Matrix.
it sounds like it like the Matrix.
The Matrix.
But if you think about, like, the system can easily put the information they want you to see and the information they want you to consume, and you're not gonna have any critical thinking. And now again, I think I'm all over the place in this
You're all over the
podcast.
place.
I know, but I just remembered this post like on a Facebook page that was super interesting for me, that I still remembered. I was a kid, so this page shared like a post with a negative caption, right? It's like they were doing a test of people. They had like a large audience, so it's the same picture. They put like a negative caption, and everyone was insulting in comments. You know, like everyone was being super negative. And then they went to another page with the same kind of audience. They put the same picture with a positive caption, and everyone was supporting this idea. So if you think about it, there is no critical thinking in these people's minds. Like they just follow, okay, the caption is like this, so this is how I should react to this kind of thing.
Yeah. It's.
I don't know if you get what I'm saying or not.
Yeah, I do get it.
Sorry. This is the ship. the how do you say it? It's the ship dilemma.
The ship dilemma.
Like a ship, like a bad ship. Like everybody behaves, looks, and does the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's very
same direction, same.
very well like emphasized on social media.
Yeah.
Because if you see in social media, another thing like following up, I don't want to sound like an asshole, ladies, but now if you see
But you
all
are.
these Instagram models, they kind of look the same. They have the same type of nose.
Yeah, the same beauty standards, the
bone
same
cheeks.
deliveries, the same.
It
kind
doesn't
of-
matter what
yeah.
color of skin they have.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
physically starting to look very, very similar,
Yeah,
which is like dangerous. It is scary,
yeah.
but it is the same
And
thing.
it keeps changing. Like, I think at a certain time it was like the skinniest girl that would be the most beautiful, and then it moved like to
Voluptuous.
she needs to be like curvy and stuff.
But like,
And then the beauty
with the
standards
big
just keep
lips, the
changing.
tiny nose,
Yeah.
and everybody is doing this kind of shit. At least that you see on social media, and it's like it only takes one for everyone else to follow.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Especially in this like sheep mentality, or like that you can see it very well, like acting in social media, as you said in this Facebook group. It's impressive how like literally like the connotation of a message can change like this. You can redirect people however you want to, which is like if you don't question everything that you see, then you're just easily pushed over the edge,
Yeah.
which it is insane. I'm sorry and thank you.
No, it's fine. It's interesting, guys. I mean, like, I've been the theme that you've been discussing, like using all these examples, is the tendency to like conform to society, right? Like and the way also, like, I mean, these days people are taught, like we're talking about school systems and stuff like that. In a way, I mean, society teaches you to mimic and flock into groups as well, and this could be super dangerous if people are all
Sorry, but before like going back into the ancients, because we used to think they like talk about the ancients. Before, in ancient time, it used to be homeschool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You got your values and your trade and your education according to the family that you lived in, because it was the family who taught you. And then if you had money, they would take you to philosophical college or whatever, or you will go as a warrior, depending on the society that you were. Right now, since 3 years, you're going into the system for education, which is very different. The same thing that we were talking before between the collective and masses. It is very different to have your pillars of education be from home and then literally just like, you know, like the finishing touches on like into like this university or college. You know what I mean?
I have the best quote for this. I don't remember who said this, but this person said, in life you get the first. No, you go to different schools. The first school is your parents, so you learn from your parents. The second school is like the actual school, like you get to learn from teachers and from the people around you. And the third school is life. And life contradicts the first two schools that you went to, you know? So what life teaches you, basically based on the events or the obstacles you go through in life, you find this huge contradiction between what you learned at home and what you learned at school. Sorry, Aslan, you can go.
Yeah. Where was I? The tendency to conform to society. I mean, it's I would say a recent thing, and I mean, also a lot of the things, the bad things that are happening in our society. I mean, the protests that you mentioned. I mean, this mass mentality of people to flock up, and I think Jung also talked about people who are imbalanced in a similar way tend to flock together as well. Like they just kind of like he said, I think they're magnetically drawn to each other in a way.
It's like the saying, tell me with whom you go with and I'll tell you who you are.
Yeah, exactly. It's that thing, and if you feel same kind of resentments and like feelings of incompetence and whatever the negative because for people usually the number one thing that needs to be uncovered before you can actually start working on yourself. I mean, it's the negative things about yourself, the things that the feelings of incompetence and the feelings of like inadequacy. And for a lot of people, those kind of feelings, if they're unresolved, you flock together and you start, projecting it on whatever it is. I mean, you also with the ideologies nowadays. I mean, there's whatever cause you want, get together and start firing. Um,
Burn a car.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very much that, and then also like what you mentioned about the media control. I mean, that's a whole another topic that I think we can also touch upon at some point in the future. It's very interesting with the manufacturing consent. I think what was the guy's name who wrote it? I forgot, but manufacturing consent is a really good book about how the whole entire system of the media, and it's created in a way to keep people at a certain level, you know, intellectually, and keep them.
Fear.
Yeah.
With fear, controlled, manipulated.
Yeah, Noam Chomsky was the guy who wrote it. And yeah, it's very. When I first like learned about it, it was a fascinating thing. I'm like, wow. So you have this like, you know, a few people at the top who are like, we can't let these people, you know, have their own unique, you know, thoughts, and like it's dangerous.
Realize their power. We cannot have individual peoples realize the power they have on this world, because if they actually realize it, then there's no way we can actually control them. So how do we just keep them in the level that we want them in the plane? We just keep them fucking numb.
Yep, that's another huge thing at play here. Yeah, media. It's just it exacerbates already existing problems where we're so close to each other. We are taught to mimic each other.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, biologically, we have a natural thing of mimicking each other. It's also like a huge factor that plays into this. But with the modern society where everyone's just kind of like close to each other with social media, you're close to people you've never even met. It's a weird thing. Like,
it is very fucking weird.
And it just creates a complete mess in your head. So, and I think like one of the, I mean, you can see in society we have a lot of different movements as well that are, you know, like the primal, you know, the what do you call it, like movement, the primal movement, like people trying to go back to the way ancient people living, like and it's all very good. I mean, it's all this. I mean, it's all like a very much needed thing, like waking up with the sun, like you know, you can push it to however extremes, you know, you want, but like ideally, that's what. I mean, biologically and physiologically and mentally and everything. I mean, it's those things that keep us happy. In a happy state, our spirit, our whole. We are whole. We're in a better position to tackle life's challenges, and and then the worst case horror scenario of it is what happened to people in the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution. I mean, that was like the epitome of. The horror that happened, you know, and
the father of social media is the telegraph.
Yeah.
If you think about it, because in the Industrial Revolution they created the telegraph where they could like message people from the other side of the world, and they realized that the world actually is not that big. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like slowly, little by little, it evolved into this different type of communication, and this evolved into something else, and eventually. We are where we are.
Yeah, and also the biggest realization, of course, is that, you know, you like, it's such a weird thing, like the realization that, oh, I'm not special. I'm, you know, and it's like it's somehow also there was this moment at some point in time where it kind of still is among like the atheist circles. It's a big thing. Like it was so edgy, you know, to be like, yeah, you're not special, you know, and I realized that we're not special.
Like
and
you're just another one.
Yeah, but it's beautiful. It's like...
I mean, like, they have a certain type of point there that means that no one else is better than anyone else. I totally agree with that. But everyone is different.
Yeah.
Everyone has its own thing.
Yeah.
Everyone... I don't want to use the word special because then it sounds very like cliche again. But everybody's unique. Yeah. For sure. For sure. Like that's true. Everybody.
I mean, even in terms of language, you cannot say that someone is uniquer or the uniquest. You know, like there's only unique. Like we're all unique.
We're humans
on our way.
We're a species. We're humans, and we're different and unique in our own different traits, and that makes us beautiful. And we should embrace these differences between each other and love each other, not create this type of hatred, which just takes us one against the other according to the skin color, according to our culture, according to our religion, which is more easily control and manipulate it. If you think about it, that we're in war, in constant war with ourselves, instead of like seeing the big picture.
Yeah. Talking about this point of like, especially we're talking about like the grand scheme of things,
Yeah.
but like just sometimes even on smaller scales, you can see that people are not welcome in this idea of having an individual who's different in a certain culture. So for example,
The famous black sheep.
well, let me just give you an example of something I just saw yesterday. So there is this old rapper. He's a pioneer. He was super good. He's called Millie Mill, and he was in this group that they started the movement of conscious rap, for example. And in this song, it was called The Message, but they started this movement of like, okay, now MCs are not just like trying to hype the crowd, but they're also saying something significant to
Yeah.
convey a certain message, right? So he said something really, it made some noise in the hip hop scene, which is he was talking about Eminem, and he was saying the only reason why Eminem is in people's like favorite or like top MCs list is just because he's white.
A white rapper, right? Yeah.
They said because just he's a white rapper. And I remember this this interview of 50 Cent. He was talking about Eminem, and he said it like really clearly. He said, hip hop music is like it's coming from black people. Like it's a black culture. There is no doubt. And black artists or black rappers cannot accept the idea that a white guy would
He's
just
doing
come
it better than them.
and is doing it better than them.
Yeah.
And that's just fact. But you see this idea of like mass societies or like tribes or like cultures, even if you're doing the same thing, even if you're abiding to the same rules, which is like he's super good in terms of like storytelling, conveying messages, multi-syllabic rhymes, like whatever. Eminem is a god MC, you know, like you
Yeah.
you cannot say something against his skills, right? But because he's different, like skin color, let's say, then we have a problem. We have an issue. And many people had this conversation of like, okay, Eminem is a guest in the house of hip hop. And that's something he addressed in his last album. But that's also a good example of like, you're doing actually the same thing, but there is one difference between you and the other people. But then you would still feel that you're not welcome in this society or in this culture.
Yeah, and we know actually that this is a very delicate subject and topic when we talk about like the history of humanity and how we have been horrible to each other with different nations towards different nations, with different races towards different races. We understand that, like totally, like believe me, I think we have lived it ourselves in a certain way or other. At least I know I have. You know, and the whole idea of this is that by generating this type of hatred difference that makes us separate ourselves even in our own society, even in our own tribe, if you want to quote unquote this, it makes easier to just like filtrate these type of messages and move us in the direction that they want to move us. When I talk about this, of course, I know we're still talking about the matrix and the system and this kind of stuff, but this is all a consequence of literally a mass society. This is all a consequence of this type of direction that the humanity has taken. Don't get me wrong. Of course, there's some good things. Like I said, life is not white and black. Life is different tonalities in gray. But we have to pay attention to these little details because these little details are important. And if we don't do it, eventually, this will fuck us up. And as a species, this will fuck us up. There's a difference, like as I said, like a collective and whatever. You know, there's something called a hive mentality, like what bees and wasps and these type of insects actually have, that they work for the good of the colony, the good of the beehive, the good of the queen. Like before, like in the ancients, what Plato used to say about the philosophical king, that democracy, it is corrupted because democracy shouldn't be given to a certain amount of people, because back at the time it was supposed to be only literal educated men 40 years plus, but because they had different types of interests, democracy was not actually in its totality pure. So he talked about the philosophical king, this pure entity that will like give judgment according to how he felt, philosophically speaking, that it deserved it. You know, like King Solomon in ancient Israel and this type of things. It's like democracy now, it is so very well transformed and deformed to what actually it was. And I understand to give voice to the people, but to the individual people, because if you give it to the masses, then there is actually no voice.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because this critique from Plato about democracy, it gives you some guidance on how to think about society. Like, okay, if we talk about democracy, we say that it's the best, and well, we live in like democracy and everyone can vote and everyone can like the mass would always win. But is that really a good thing? Like, imagine if half the population don't have enough tools or wisdoms, or like just, well, let me structure my idea. Let's say that half the population are not enlightened enough, or they don't know what's best for their community or for their country, and they're allowed to vote. And let's say there is a small portion of people who are actually enlightened and they know what, like, long-term wise, what works better. Then it's unbalanced, because you have more than half of the people, they don't know shit, they're just voting, and they feel that this is what's gonna work for them. But also, like, going back to the same kind of influence, they're also influenced by the system that wanted to create them this way, to keep the same pattern of people going through the same thing.
This is a very subject topic, to be honest, because we're getting a little bit into politics.
Yeah.
But I mean, and we don't want to get into politics, but I mean,
not today at least.
Not today at least, yeah.
Interconnected. I mean, we don't want
It is interconnected. Yeah, of course, like, at the end of the day is, you know, like, society is this living system with different ramifications here and there that generates this reality. Like, not society, this reality, it is like that, which involves everything and everywhere and everyone, which is very, like, impressive that we're part of a whole, but we're also away from it. And that's the beauty of life, I guess. And we're saying this about, like, all the philosophy we have read about our life experiences, about how we perceive, like, you have your own opinions, you know what I mean? We live in this world, beautiful world, where you are entitled to experience whatever life has given you. But in a general abstract of the word, of the word abstract, we do live in this parameter where the moment we are born till the moment we die, we have to constantly figure out what the fuck is this at the end of the day. This is called life, and what is this that we are involved in with other humans? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And I think I would like to, for myself, I guess, to finish with this would be like, what? Please say his name again.
Kierkegaard.
Thank you.
Yeah, this guy.
Dude, I
this
cannot
guy said the
pronounce
following.
his last name.
Just go.
Sorry, I love the dude, but I cannot pronounce his last name. I apologize. I wish that on my grave might be put the individual.
Oh yeah.
I was just gonna talk about the individual. What a synchronicity. Yeah, I mean, I think also for me, what I was gonna say is the main thing, I think, and we're talking about democracy, the masses, and all that. I mean, I think the main thing that people need to come to realization of it's the importance of the individual, because it's so easy to look at groups of people. I mean, it's a really big thing now as well, with, like, you know, groups, like I identify you as part of a group rather than as a person, and then I project onto you everything that I hate about myself, and then you're part of a group. So it's just the individual is completely lost in that picture. It's just nothing. And then you have a bunch of groups of people projecting their things on each other. And I think this is the worst, obviously, in America than compared to European countries, although it's getting, I mean, pretty bad as well in UK, I would say. And but yeah, the I think what Jung would say about the current state and of the society at large is still what he said, and I think this speaks of his unbelievable like intelligence and ability to feel like currents running in society, that his message is still kind of relevant. Is the focus on the individual. And as an individual, what you have to do is focus on your inner self. And he talked about this thing like the door that goes inwards is very small. It's very hard to find it, but that is the mission of the individual, and it's part of the individuation. And the main thing he talked about in all these issues about the you know, the society and democracy and protests and everything, it's about our own inner shadow, our own the darker sides of ourselves, which we do not come to grips with, do not integrate into our conscious self. And when that's not done, you're gonna start projecting it. Your personality is gonna change. So it's like a volcano that's kind of needs to erupt, you know, and it's just building up, and then, you know, and that insane explosion. I mean, that was the 20th century. That was the world wars, and that was yeah, and in a way today, what's happening, I think it's kind of somewhat reminiscent of it. I mean, some of the things that are like brewing up, you know, it's very much. I think we're gaining more awareness, and we're learning a lot as well, which is really good. And I think like I'm hopeful that there are people today, and I my hope is with the individuals, the people, you know, because and the focus has to be on individuals. And when we're talking, we want to talk to every one of you, the people who are listening to this. And
definitely
it's the realization that, you know, if something is fucked up in the world, in my society, in my family, in my country, I need to look into myself. I am the solution to this. And that is what I'll end with as well.
Yeah, good stuff. I think just worth mentioning about also like the Jungian perspective about the concept of individuation is that he also believes that you should not strive for perfection, but you should strive for completion. Like you need to be complete. And this mission is a lifelong mission. Like it's going to be a work in progress. And that's also aligned with the sociological perspective of postmodernism, which is the path to individuation is gonna take you forever, but it's a good constant change on yourself. Like again, like the 1% better every day. That's better than no change at all.
Yeah, it's like constant rebirth. I mean, of yourself in a way, right? Burning and rebirth, burning and rebirth. Yeah.
And from my side, I also have a good ending. For my part, at least, when it comes to individuation, which is basically, guys, you didn't remind me of telling you the thing about Zarathustra, but I just reminded myself. And count on yourself as an individual. Don't expect something from other people, especially if they're Aslan and Adriano. But so in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, when this guy Zarathustra finds his disciples and he started like teaching them. At some point, he would tell them all like, okay, don't follow me again. Like, be ashamed of my perspective. Go find yourselves. And they're like, that's a bit surprising. Like, even when you read the chapter, you're like, okay, this is the wisest guy there. And he taught them everything, and now he's just telling them like, okay, like basically just fuck off and don't look for me, don't think about me. And the idea is basically, even if you think that you get like the wisdom and you're enlightened, also have some have a room of challenging these beliefs or these ideas. And I think this happened to all of us. Like when you read a book, or firstly, like you discover, like when I discovered Freud, I was like, oh shit, that's enlightenment, you know. And then I found Jung, and I'm like, that's another kind of enlightenment, you know. But you should have this perspective and this analogy of just like, okay, I need to keep improving, and there is no absolute truth, there is no ultimate truth. I should just keep digging. And the best example of that is like Socrates. Like, okay, I need to strive, I need to keep looking for knowledge, I need to challenge people to give me their knowledge. And also that is the best way of doing it is also like just listen to what people have to say. Like sometimes, okay, you have your own ideas, but by listening you're getting more knowledge instead of just talking for the sake of talking, just to signal, for example. Especially in mass societies, like everyone is trying to give knowledge to people rather than listening, right? And also one of the last thing that I wanted to mention is about the individuation process, or this path. And I think you mentioned something about balance, like you should try to balance life, because you should not just focus on one thing and keep doing the same thing without, you know, have some kind of diversity. Like, okay, I need to work to earn money, but I need to take care of my health, I need to socialize with people. The path to individuation could be taken to a bit like a kind of extreme that would make you like selfish or lonely. And Nietzsche warned about this, like also mentioned the importance of finding balance in this path. So I think individuation as a process is correlated to the things that we mentioned before, because if you want to understand individuation, you need to go back and understand the persona, you need to understand the ego, you need to understand the shadow. And I like how this is super fucking interesting, that everything is correlated, but at the same time you're like, okay, when I thought that I figured out what I should work on, I found out like there are many other aspects.
Yeah, it's like the pieces of a puzzle, basically, you know. And I think like for us as well, I mean, with every episode that we do, we're touching up on things, and we want to, you know, explore every topic in detail as well. So we're going to try to like explore individuation in detail as a separate topic, and explore, you know, the ego, the shadow. Well, the shadow we did, but we could actually do a lot more episodes on it. Honestly, it's pretty in depth. We could, I mean, and that's what we're doing. And I think like as well for the podcast, I mean, we're learning a lot. I just also wanted to mention that
Definitely,
as well. I mean, through conversation, through like the readings that we're doing. And I was thinking about it as well. I mean, you know, like I think there are two ways you can categorize like interests, primary interests in your life. I think I've been very, very focused on like the reality and the day-to-day, like career, and you know, for the last 2 years probably, something like that, I've been very, very aggressively focused on improving my craft and the skills and learning everything for that.
He's a good designer, by the way, guys.
But then I kind of neglected the sort of conceptual and like like what we're
self-fulfillment,
doing now.
basically.
What we're doing now. And I think there's 100% a name to this, and some Latin or Greek you know, terminology for this, you know.
I think that's literally self-actualization, because we're doing something different than what the norm is expecting from us, like also society and stuff. And I think the idea of the podcast is basically, dude, like we discussed self-sabotage. That's something we overcame with the podcast. We're doing more research, and we're getting more knowledge, and we're understanding ourselves more, and we're understanding the others as well. And the thing that we talked about, the last man, we're also creating something. Like that's a form of creation.
Loving the process.
And loving the process. Thanks, Adriano.
Loving the process.
I'm loving the process.
I am fucking loving this process, man. I mean, every single minute I spend on it is wonderful.
Yeah, definitely.
It is super dope. Thank you, guys. I have to say thank you.
And thank you to the people who are listening to this, wherever you are. thank you so much, and we want to do our best and as much as we can, to give you the best listening experience and interesting conversations and a lot of other cool things in the future. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Thank
That's
you
it
all,
from me.
and
Thank you,
waiting for
guys.
your feedbacks, and also put in the comment section if you're listening on, or if you're watching this on YouTube, put in the comment section maybe the topics that you want us to discuss, because we're open to discuss anything basically in the podcast. And well, if you're listening on Spotify or on other platforms, just share it with your friends and tag us on Instagram.
Thank you again, and don't forget, we're the Human Library. Peace out.
Good stuff.
See ya.
Dude, I didn't mention any references that I had in my talks.
But dude, it was very fucking cool.
It was amazing.
It was a very good podcast. And I'm pissing myself.